A girl stood alone in a place that felt familiar, until the phone rang. He opened his eyes. It was a dream, the same one again. Chilbok sounded annoyed on the call, mentioning the news children had been going missing. She asked why he kept refusing jobs. He replied that the work was hard and the pay too low. She cut him off, explaining a part-time worker hadn't shown up and they needed someone for one day. Then she added that the pay would be double. On the way, an old woman stopped him and offered a divination reading. He dismissed it as superstition, but as he turned to leave, she casually said that what he was looking for was hidden in a hole between the roots of a tree. At work, he labored until break, exhaustion catching up to him. A girl from the staff handed him a cold drink. When asked why, as interested, she brushed it off. Work resumed, then stopped. A USB containing a client list had gone missing, and everyone was ordered to search. As he looked down, he noticed strange marks leading toward a tree. Between its roots was a small hole. The woman's words echoed back, "A USB?" Later, he returned to the fortune-telling stall and spoke about the dream, about meeting someone he couldn't remember. She smiled and said he'd been walking around without using his eyes, that he had another pair, eyes that could see the truth.
At her words, an old memory flashed through his mind. Startled, he asked her to tell him more. She continued, saying that he will need those eyes to the path he's going to take. He must speak only to those that he could see through those eyes, and that's the truth. She continued, if he wanted to meet the person he dreamt of, he has to stop avoiding his destiny. Then she grabbed his hands, stared at it for a moment, and said, "It's done." He stood there, thoroughly confused. And just like that, back to business, she asked for the payment. He wondered if it was his imagination. "Do you take credit card?" he said.
Back home, he opened a drawer and found an old pair of glasses he hadn't touched since an incident. His phone rang again. Chilbok Park thanked him for finding the USB and invited him to dinner. Mid-conversation, she received another call and asked him to look around the gallery while she finished. He wandered among the paintings. One caught his eye, familiar.
The drawing looked just like the place from his dream with the girl.
Strange, unclear figures lingered within it. Uneasy, he put on the glasses. From behind, Chilbok remarked that he had an eye for art. He turned. Where she stood was a giant sparrow. Frozen, he listened as the figure explained. It once belonged to Manhwa, created for a fairy that could enter drawings and trap those who followed. Some inside were still alive. His gaze dropped to her talons, the same marks near the tree. So it was her. Remembering the old woman's warning, he spoke carefully, saying it must be difficult for her to live among humans. A brief pause followed. She laughed, mistaking him for a demon, and admitted she planned to kill him. Acting calm, Yisun asked about the painting. She replied it was the Orchid Temple, and that the figures were humans she'd collected over time. Then one of them moved. The missing children. The moment he asked how to save them, she realized something was odd. He was human. She slammed him against the painting, forcing him inside it as his consciousness faded. Then the dream flashed. Blue light surged from his hand as strange markings spread across his skin.
Panic filled her eyes. She stumbled back, eyes wide, screaming. "A curse, it'll spread to me." With a twisted snarl of fear, she whirled around and fled into the darkness.
He stared at his hand, realizing the fortune-teller had changed him.
A memory surfaced, the voice, telling him not to blame himself.
He looked up. The children were still inside the painting. Helpless rage surged through him. He punched the wall, and his hand sank into the canvas. He felt warmth, weight. He pulled. A child fell out onto the floor, alive. The news later reported the missing children safely found in a gallery cafe. Relief followed, but unease remained as he noticed the markings on his arm. A headline caught his eye. A missing person. A familiar place. The old woman's face surfaced in his mind. He went back to the alley. It was empty. A shop owner told him no fortune-teller had ever been there. A man clutched his shoulder, running down the corridor. Behind him, a faint chime followed, drawing closer. A voice called out to him. He broke down sobbing as he ran. A girl drifted through the hallway, the soft chime sounding with each step as she called for him. He dove under a table, his hands clawing over his mouth as his jaw trembled. The footsteps stopped. Bones snapped. Her neck stretched and twisted violently, her head rotating until her face slammed into his vision. "Found you." She crawled toward him, her smile stretched wider and wider. Then she lunged. Her jaws closed over his face. The scream ripped through the building, loud enough to reach the street. People gathered nearby, gossiping about the scream they'd heard. An old woman called the police to check what had happened. The officers said no one lived there, and that the area was controlled by a redevelopment association, so they couldn't enter. They warned her not to call again, and left. An old man stepped in and warned everyone not to spread rumors about ghosts, saying no one would want to live there. However, the old man didn't know that rumors were already spreading. News articles reported mysterious disappearances. Online comments, eerie photos, and rising numbers all pointed to the same place. Later, an old woman said calmly that if he went there, he would meet the one he was looking for. She called it his destiny. If he paid, she said, she would pray for his safety. He nodded and reached for his card, expecting an old woman to pull out a card machine. He packed his things while the driver told him to hurry. Glancing at the boxes, the driver mocked him, asking if he was collecting books to eat, as it would make more sense to buy a proper house, especially since the place he was moving to was where people kept disappearing. Yesen told him not to worry. He wasn't human. He was a book fairy. The truck stopped in front of a large mansion. The driver said the last tenant had fled since the house was haunted and offered him a ride back at a discount. But our MC wasn't scared of ghosts, so he declined. As usual, he handed over his card, like he genuinely thought everyone carried a card machine in their pocket. Unfortunately, the driver didn't accept cards, even if he was a book fairy. As the driver drove away, he muttered that he didn't understand who would live in a place rumored to have ghosts and monsters. The driver glanced back and asked if Yesen really didn't know monsters were said to live there. Yesen froze, his soul briefly considering an early exit. It almost left his body when the landlord called out to him. Yesen asked about the rumors. The owner dismissed them as nonsense. Yesen showed the articles, then asked softly if there was something else besides ghosts. Demon? The man stiffened. Wait, how did you? Yesen's brain stopped responding. The man cut himself off and laughed it away. Yesen thought about leaving, but he'd already moved out and had almost no money left. A few onlookers watched him in silence before dispersing. Can I pay with a card? Before he could finish, the man flung the card out of his hand. It was as if the universe had finally said no to our broke MC. As Yesen unpacked his belongings, an unreasonable number of books, he told himself he could handle ghosts. He paused. The confidence packed itself back into a box. He put on his glasses and searched the house. In the attic, something hung from the ceiling, and his hand began to twitch and itch. He remembered the woman screaming about a curse. For a moment, he considered leaving. Then he tightened his grip on the glasses.
Our broke MC insisted he didn't move here just because the rent was cheap. No, the courtyard was nice too, also cheap. He glanced outside. Pitch black, 0 humans. His soul left the chat. Daytime sounds good. A black portal formed on the street, slowly widening. Something was approaching. Something inhuman, and that faint chiming again. Meanwhile, inside, our MC curled up like a terrified armadillo, regretting every life choice. It felt like 4 hours had passed. He checked the clock. 15 minutes. 30 minutes later, he was staring into the fridge like wisdom might appear. He'd rather face a ghost than a demon. Then he heard bells chiming. He rushed upstairs and peeked through the attic window. A whole parade. People, banners, drums. A midnight ritual. He slid his glasses and looked down. Foxes, wolves, horns, demons disguised as humans. He stared, deadpan. A memory flashed. He was small. A demon asked how he could see it, demanding to know if he was a demon too. Yesen gulped. I'm inside, it's safe. Terrified, he convinced himself he just needs to focus. He headed downstairs. A girl was walking along the corridor, inside. Beyond the locked door, his brain blue-screened. He backed away slowly, clutching his glasses like a holy relic. Their eyes met. He turned his face away. Then he heard it, a wet, ripping sound. He looked back. Her neck had stretched unnaturally far, twisted like torn rope, squatting over the parapet rail with a wide, skin-splitting smile aimed right at him.